In January 2012, I set off to cross Te Urewera and the surrounding forests. I started from Wairata on State Highway 2 and planned to get to State Highway 5. My route would take me across almost 200 kilometres of bush terrain, some of it tracked, some of it untracked, all of it pretty rugged. Sometimes less is more. I hoped less food would lead to greater satisfaction and help me to know the bush, really know it. My goal was to hunt and gather all the food that I would need to get to the other side. The only food items I took with me were salt and pepper. This is my story. Well, that's the bus leaving. So the adventure starts here, I guess. About 150 kilometres or so of bush, maybe 3 weeks walking. At least I won't have to worry about the food going stale. Good to go. It was easy to daydream about living off the land, but reality is not daydreams. In reality, I had no idea how my trip was going to play out, and I wasn't totally confident either. There was definitely a strong possibility of being back at the same place within a week thinking, well, that was a really dumb idea. I didn't know whether I could do it or not, but I didn't want to die wondering either. Yeah, watercress. That was a good start. But it looked like small game was going to be pretty hard to come by. Not good news for someone planning on developing an appetite for possums. It was soon fairly obvious that most of the plants had shot their edible shoots earlier in the summer too, all gone to flower, and it was between seasons for berries. I didn't have a whole lot to show for my foraging when I reached my first camp beside the Urewera River. Hey, well, that was my first night. I had eel for dinner. I was lucky enough to find a little baby bird that was dead, so that was my bait. That was all I found all day. We got some lovely watercress to go with the eel, and so good enough for lunch today, and it'd be nice to have something better for dinner. But it looks it's a tough place. There's not a lot to eat out here. It was stunning terrain and plenty challenging. The river was still running high though, and I'd had to back off my first attempt at crossing it. I hoped and was sure it would be the hardest and the scariest day of the traverse, but unfortunately it wasn't either, not by a long shot. Four sketchy river crossings and lots of climbing high to try and get around gorge sections of the river. It's really rugged country. I think the seriousness of what I've set out to do is sort of starting to sink in. Didn't find much food today, I have to say. Didn't find much food at all. A few berries, bit of a stelia, few superjack shoots. Tough country. I decided to fly camp further upstream. That evening, as I sat beside the Karanga River eating dinner, I watched the eels make slow but certain progress upstream. It was impossible to me that they could get up the rapids, and yet they found a way. I just had to do the same thing. Make progress, however slow, and find a way around the obstacles I encountered along the way, whatever they might be. This is the third and last section of the eel I caught on the first night. that's about how much protein I eat a day, but I'm trying to supplement that with some carbohydrate, and some of the best forms of that in the bush is this called wharawhara. All of these have gone to flower, so there's no shoots. Sometimes you have to get up here and this is what we're after. The bush potato for me. Yesterday was one of the most technically challenging bits of country I've ever had to traverse. I was taking it very carefully because one little error in that sort of country and that'd be the end of it for sure. So I'm living on berries and an eel. I've been carrying it for a few days. There's not much food. It takes me all day just to gather as I'm walking, just to gather enough berries. Yeah, so right now it's looking improbable to do this thing. Yeah, it's certainly a challenge anyway.
However, there's nothing quite like a well-placed shot to change one's outlook. I took the back steaks and the fillets, and the heart and the kidneys to eat fresh, and processed and dried as much of the leg steaks into jerky or biltong as I could manage. As I lived entirely from the land, I thought about what that meant. When I ate wild foods, part of the wilds became part of me. The sustenance in the food I ate, whether it was from an animal or vegetable, became a part of my own flesh and bones. The longer I stayed, the more of that place I was becoming. I was part of the food chain in Te Urewera, part of that ecosystem. It made me feel a whole lot closer to the place once I realised that fact.
Another 20 minutes. This has been boiling for about 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, so it's as tender as anything. I'm glad I bought the salt and pepper. Chopping up some of this venison for making into jerky, or biltong really. Beautiful. Put a bit of white pepper on that. That'll give it a bit of flavour and keep the flies off it. Able to keep the drying of the venison going a bit longer during the night through just racking it in front of the fire like that. These don't look very appetising, but they taste alright. Off track again. There's our stream heading up that right hand fork, the Matakuhia.
As I headed deeper and deeper into the bush, the commitment increased. A lot. I had to keep believing in the abundance of the forest. Because foraging is an act of faith. But there was always a tension between conviction and skepticism. Faith sat on one shoulder, confident the bush would deliver, while doubt crouched on the other, cynically forecasting my failure. And I heard them both.
So this is day 5 or 6 I think. Just got to an old hunter's camp. Obviously some other lonely people here, and I'm at the bottom of a big track, so heading up there this morning, see how far I can get. Just climbed all the way up to the Rangakapua track. Mate, this country's just absolute tiger country. This is what I found on my gatherings this morning till lunchtime. So you know, there's not an astelia bush on the ground. There's not a berry. After being down in the bush all day, being up here is just magnificent. Right above the tops, and incredible views all around. Amazing terrain, big country, not much food. It's nice to get to a place to camp here. I'm pretty much down to the last of my venison. I've got one more meal, I think. This place though just seems to keep providing when you think there's nothing left. I got down lower altitude and I got into some nice cold wharawhara, some cabbage tree, heart. So yeah, I just got to keep the faith that Te Urewera will provide.
I hunted up the Mangatautau that evening and was lucky enough to encounter a young stag. Most of the meat took a few days to come right for eating, but the heart and kidneys I could eat straight away. My gumboots had worn the skin off my leg in a few places, and a day or two to mend would do them good, while I jerked as much of the stag as I could manage.
I'm sitting beside some tree nettle. It's probably the most fiercely defended plant in the world, I would say. There's enough poison in 5 of the tiny little spines on there to kill a guinea pig. You really wouldn't want to be a guinea pig around here. But there's other nettle here too. This is what I eat as sort of pot herbs. These are my greens. Not as good as silver beet, but it does the job.
Te Urewera is the spiritual homeland of Tuhoi. They are the kaitiaki of that forest, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. The peaks and tracks and waterways, they carry that human history in their names. Those names show the extent to which that immense tract of wildness was known to Tuhoi. Except to them it wasn't wilderness, it was home. And the mist wrapped itself around the hills like a cloak, and the streams mumbled and murmured at dusk. Then I could feel it. I could feel the human history that links that past to this present. I never truly felt alone in that place.
Just built a traditional Maori Kiori trap. So this is how it works. Bend down a branch, the trigger hook's behind here, put a little step here, noose comes down through here, so when the rat goes through here, the steps on the little step, you'll be well caught. Now I just got to give him a reason to go in there, so I'll put some meat here, and then I've got to stop him coming from the other side. So I need. Well, here we are in the morning. No rat. It's a good thing we're eating venison tonight. Here I am, reached civilization again briefly. This is the Matakuhia road.
When I reached the road, I decided to ditch some weight and travel more freely. I would pick the gear up after I'd got out the other side. I ditched maps and batteries that had served their purpose, And then I thought about what I could do without. It was a liberating feeling, taking weight out of my pack, and maybe I got a little bit carried away. But as I hefted my sleeping bag and fly, I rationalised I could do without them both. I thought a lot about my sleeping bag that afternoon though.
Well, I made it out to the main road, and some folks came past, and I gave them a letter to post to Sal to let her know I'd got to the halfway point. And then I did probably the rashest thing I've ever done, and I offloaded a bunch of gear. So I haven't regretted it so far. It's been really fast moving, but see how I feel tomorrow morning. So here's the difference tonight. I've got my feet in my pack. I've got my downy on and my hat on. And check out the view. Good thing about being cold is get up early, so I got an early start, and I'm up in the mossy goblin forest in the mist. Very spooky.
The Matakuhia track provided access for animal control in the 50s and 60s. This track, along with many others accessing remote backcountry, has been allowed to overgrow for several decades. There is much snow damage and windfall across it, so I expected hard going and difficult route finding. It was high country too, above the growing line for many of the food species I had come to rely on. I planned to live on my dried meat reserves until I reached the Waia River.
So I got Matakuhia trig behind me in the background. I'm just over the brow of the bridge here, so you can probably hear the wind, but I'm not getting it. Jerky for lunch. I've got one more dinner and breakfast maybe of fresh meat, and then I'm on the jerky till I find something else. I'll have a look in a minute and show you why it feels like I'm walking along the roof of Urewera. So that's the ridge I'm heading along. Seems to stretch on forever. Probably me for the next 2 days. Amazing panorama up here. Gorgeous place. Big country. Just to prove me wrong, like I really thought this whole ridge was going to be a dry area. There was going to be no game, no possums. There's not much tucker up here at all. But just to prove me wrong, a stag jumped up in front of me, and so we got some meat today as well. So good timing there, because I'm on my last back steak. So looking forward to that with some fresh kidneys for dinner, bit of liver. I was really quite concerned about this leg. It's definitely one of the cruxes, so feels good now. In a good position to get from here down to Waia hopefully tomorrow. So it's really keen to get down to the Matakuhia hut tonight. Hey, so I made it to Matakuhia hut. Mate, you just can't believe how thankful I am to be here. It was a sight for sore eyes, I can tell you. Epic trip down off the tops, just difficult route finding, and then just this horrendous stream bash down a stream full of log jams and slippery boulders, and it just seemed to go on and on and on forever. So I'm here and I'm in the hut and I'm bloody loving it. It's an awesome place. Hey, well, I've got one. It's a little beauty. It's going to be just delicious. Missed out all yesterday, tried really hard, but finally got a fish. So here she is, the trout cooking. Beautiful. Alright, we've got beautiful crispy skin trout for lunch. We've got some tawa kernels, a few astelia shoots here, Not doing too well on the greens, only a couple of superjack shoots. But hey, this is a very, very welcome change from venison. It's been a long time coming. I'm sick to death of venison steak, so bon appetit. Oh mate, beautiful. I'll have the other half for the other half of the trout for my dinner.
The Te Waiata hut was built in 1956 by the Forest Service, primarily to facilitate animal control. It's made of hand-hewn slabs of native timber. It has a whopping great hearth and it just oozes character. So fine an example is it of a hut made from the bush that it's managed as an historic place. Beside the hut is a grove of towering kahikateas like I've never seen before. Trees such as these used to cover the whole of the Hauraki Plains in the 18th century, all swapped for grass and muddy rivers. Those trees were like having a cathedral right outside the front door. The Waiau River and the Te Waiata hut were just great soul food, and I got some variation to my physical food. It was the first hut I had used, and the perfect place to rest up and recharge.
I've just been out chopping some wood. Check this lot out. That'll be entree tonight. Sweet. Oh, here we are. Entree is served. And pretty good. Pretty good. Anything's better than venison at the moment. I guess this is what you'd call when grub's up, literally.
Couldn't stay forever, unfortunately, so I headed up the Waiau River to Blue Slip, headed over a low ridge into the Maungangarara stream to find a route over into the Whirinaki side of the range.
Up the side until you get to places like this where you just can't get past, and so you've got to pick a crossing. Beautiful river. Fishing my way up here, not successful yet. Just got another lovely trout out of this pool behind me. So it's going to be beautiful. I'll cook that up the Mangakehika hut probably.
The Maungangarara stream began as one of the highlights of the trip. It was totally absorbing to travel and full of intrigue. Full of waterfalls too. This part of Te Urewera is one of the most rugged. No track links it to the Whirinaki forest on the other side of the range. So it was always going to be the crux of the traverse. But little did I know then just how difficult it would become. Eventually I reached a waterfall that I couldn't climb up nor find a way around, and I decided to retrace my steps and try another branch of the stream that I had passed earlier.
I was rushing and I was telling myself not to rush. I couldn't help it, and now I'm slipped over and crushed this under my rifle. I actually thought I had some stitches, and I'm kind of pleased I don't, because it's a real mess. It's all crushed. Anyway, see how that baby goes.
My haste had been in vain. The other branch of the stream was even worse. I backtracked, took a long drink from the creek, and climbed to a ridge, which didn't look like a sure thing either.
Well, that's where I was, way down there. Now I'm way up here, and I got to get round the back of that thing to try and get over to the Mangakehika. I can tell you I'm Pretty wasted. Pretty wasted.
It was difficult enough country with two good hands. Carrying a pack, a rifle and an injury, and without enough quality carbs in my diet, I felt stretched to my limits. There were steep sections where I could not reverse the moves I had made. I was in deep, committed to finding a way forward, because retreat no longer felt like an option.
Well, it's been an epic afternoon, epic day actually, after smashing my finger. Finger's spent its day in a film canister just to protect the end of it. Anyway, I'm all played out pretty much. I'm a long way from Matakuhia hut. I just got in the most heinous country that you can imagine. It was like almost like 100 meters an hour sort of stuff. Here's my trout. It's been riding on the outside of my pack. It's about how I feel. It's about as he looks. It was just the nastiest stuff that Mother Nature could throw at you up there. Just thick bush, steep as anything, rock slopes. I took far too many risks, and rather than carry on tonight and try and get closer to Matakuhia, and maybe I'll make it with a torch, I could very well end up dead as well. So I'm just gonna, I found a play. I finally got to water after a bloody long time, so I'm gonna try and make the best of the spot. There's plenty of firewood, I've got plenty of food, wouldn't want a sleeping bag. Yeah, all good. Oh, it's almost dark where I am. Basically the problem is just downstream where I am, we're waterfalled out, so I just don't have the energy to go around at the moment. So I've got a camp set up. We've got a fire, coil building there, and scraped out a bit of a hollow in the rocks here, put some fern down, and that'll be my bed. So pretty comfortable. I'll probably cook up that trout tonight, that'd be nice. Then tomorrow try and figure out how the hell to get out of here. With a fresh head and a belly full of food, it'd be a bit smarter than trying to do it in a half light with no energy. I don't think I've ever given so much in a day as I have today. I'm just absolutely exhausted, so I'm out. See ya.
This time the spear carried me all the way down to the main stream. It was a great relief to be out of the bluffs. The trout had been the last of my fresh meat, so it was a really good feeling to get to lower country where I might have a chance of finding some more calories. To me, there is no animal in New Zealand more graceful than the deer, and I have an abiding respect for them. But deer were also my quarry. While I utilised each animal as fully as I could, I simply couldn't carry all I would have liked to. But sometimes it's just the way it is.
Thanks, fella. Great to have some venison. It's in a beautiful place. The only trouble is waterfalls out.
I had waterfalls in front of me and waterfalls behind me. I was about as bluffed out as I'd ever been. I took as much meat as I could manage and followed the deer's own tracks out of the hanging valley. which led to an unlikely route down a precipitous spur to a creek bed. It was full of log jams and avalanche debris, but it was a veritable highway compared to where I'd been. Things were a little different on this side of the range. I didn't have to think about where to place my feet. I didn't have to decide the route. My mind was able to relax, and my body followed. The Whirinaki side of the range was easier country, but the huts seemed sterile somehow compared to the Te Kapiti. They felt empty. I thought about home, my girls and Sal. Looking at the date, I thought, mate, you could be out by the weekend. Spend it with the family. And that's what I decided to do. 3 big days would get me to the road, and I had 3 days fresh meat.
Mate, you wouldn't want to stick here, that's for sure.
The largely protein diet I existed on was sufficient to power me across flat terrain as fast as I wanted to go. But on the hills, man, my legs felt leaden. The energy simply wasn't getting to my muscles at the rate it was being demanded. Sometimes I simply had to crawl up hills at a snail's pace. What I needed was quality carbohydrates, but the table forests were far behind me, and quality carbs were hard to find.
Hey, well I've just got to the site of Matakuhia Saddle Hut. There's no hut here. So I'm just going to carry on to the upper Matak hut. Upper Matakuhia hut after a long day. It was super cold, raining up on the tops, and took me forever to warm up. This is a little slice of paradise for what I hope will be my last night in here. Yeah, gorgeous little place.
There was plenty of tinned food in the hut, but I wasn't even tempted. I did however find a bottle of Merlot on the track, a gift I couldn't pass up, and a fitting find with which to toast my final night in the hills. It was a great place to reflect on the previous 17 days. I'd given myself over to the forest, I'd kept the faith, and when all was said and done, I'd been pretty well looked after. I was no longer the same either. I could see a little further, and the bush and I were on the best of terms. Not far to go now, just a few ridges away, but the tail had a sting in it. The last day was an exercise in persistence. The track was so overgrown and covered in windfall wreckage that for the most part it bore no resemblance to a track at all. It was also raining and freezing cold. I'd lost a few kilos of body weight, all of it fat, and I wasn't a very chubby bloke to begin with. I was as wet as a trout and not much warmer than one.
Here we are, we're at the other side.
Yep, I felt a little beaten up at the end, but half dead felt pretty good just then. Better than being only half alive, had I never chased my dream. I was elated. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd travelled almost 200 kilometres through some of the most rugged bush in New Zealand. I'd seen some amazing sights, visited places I'd only ever read about, and many I never knew existed. I'd surmounted some formidable obstacles, some of them physical, some of them psychological, and I'd foraged and hunted for all the calories along the way to do it. I'd done my salt and pepper traverse,